Hi, I'm Art Ellis. I'm Professor of Education here at SPU and Director of the Center for Global Curriculum Studies, which involves me and other faculty as well as doctoral students to trips to Russia, China, Taiwan, Germany, Norway, Spain, and a number of other countries. So that's what I do. I also write books. I've published over 20 books. Latest is a book titled Research on Innovations, Educational Innovations. Came out in 2016. So, in terms of working with doctoral students, I've made myself some notes here. I'm in the field of curriculum instruction, and that covers a lot of ground. K to 12, across all the subjects, history, mathematics, social studies, language arts, etc., science, and higher education as well. So I've directed studies in all of those areas. The instructional part that I would be involved in terms of dissertations has to do with experimental studies and quasi-experimental studies in which students are randomly assigned to groups and we test out some innovative treatment. For example, metacognition, student engagement, reflective assessment, etc., to see if these things are efficacious and if they make a difference. And that's a very good training ground for students, doctoral students, to do this type of study. These are intervention studies done in school settings. Now that isn't always possible, so let's take a look at the curriculum aspect of dissertations as well. And for the curriculum aspect, I've been involved in content analysis of textbooks. I've had several doctoral students take a look at social studies textbooks, mathematics textbooks, and so on, and asking even international comparisons. How is it taught differently, that is mathematics or something like that? How is it taught differently in Japan versus the United States or Russia, and so on. Then there's another type of dissertation which I've been directing in the last several years with great success because it's basically a library type dissertation. It's called meta-analysis, where a doctoral student will take a look at a topic, for example, student engagement in science, or perhaps success programs at the community college level, or problem-based learning, and one on going right now, currently, one on reflective self-assessment by students. But a meta-analysis takes a look at all the studies in a certain area, gathering those, and then trying to find out what kind of an effect size comes out of that. So that's these two types of dissertations, one where you're actually doing an intervention study in a school, is one thing, but it's not simple always to get a school to cooperate. That's something that we try to do, but sometimes there's a big difference between the real world of schools and the ivory tower of higher education, and then there's a little bit of suspicion there. So where we can, we like to do those, but where we can't, then to turn to the library for meta-analytic studies, and those are very, very fruitful and very, very important because just as in medicine, meta-analysis is very important. For example, if you want to know the effects of coffee, you take a look at all these studies on coffee, some of which show this, some of which show that, and then finding what kind of an effect size do we have. And we could say that about these topics in education. So these are some of the types of dissertations. I'm just taking a look at my notes here to see if there's anything else here. Well, I should mention mixed methods studies. Sometimes students will want to do a quantitative study, which might involve a quasi or experimental or an experimental study, but then also to create rich, dense conceptual descriptions of the topic under investigation through interviews and surveys and so on. Right now I have a student doing, a doctoral student doing a study of perceptions of childhood experience, part of adults, contrasting Chinese Americans with Taiwanese Chinese and with mainland Chinese. So you can see curriculum instruction, as I say, covers a lot of ground, and there are lots of times, lots of opportunities for studies. Um, my own philosophy of directing doctoral studies is not to hover, but to find out what student can do. We're pretty selective in our program here, and we tend to admit bright people, and we know that they're capable of taking coursework at the graduate level and succeeding. But what we don't know always is the extent to which they can exceed on their own. While I like to operate as a coach and give critical insight as a student pursues his or her dissertation, I like to see what they can do. So it seems to me that to empower the student, to give the student an opportunity to see what he can do, given a very interesting problem, one that's worthwhile. And I think that's part of the coaching aspect, is to help people figure out what is a worthwhile problem, what is worth studying. Is this topic that you're interested in, is this something that's not going away, or is this going to be in the category of a fad or some temporary trend? Now, we have a cohort model, and I strongly advise students to make some friends in the cohort, get to know some people, make connections. My experience here, and I've directed over 50 dissertations at SPU, so I think that's far and away the record. My advice to students is to find 2 or 3 people to study with, to coach each other, do peer coaching, working together, staying connected, and above all, stay connected to your advisor of the dissertation. So and one other piece of advice that occurs to me is early on, find someone on the faculty who has interests similar to your own, and begin to meet with that person and get a sense of attachment to an advisor early on, because that will help you focus. And it's easy to forget that the dissertation and the doctoral program in general is much more narrowly focused than a BA or an MA. And so you're really moving toward a dissertation from day one in the doctoral program. So that's who I am, Art Ellis, Curriculum Instruction and Director of the Center for Global Curriculum Studies. Thank you.